It seems that the more we go looking for fascinating artifacts, the more we find. The past few years have been an especially busy time for scientists, historians, and archaeologists who've made some truly wonderful discoveries, both ancient and modern. We like to stay up to date with what's been going on in the world of archaeology, and we also like to make sure that all of you stay up to date too. Here are all the latest and greatest discoveries made in recent times, many of which have to be seen to be believed. Our first remarkable discovery comes not from the field of archaeology, but from botany. It's an incredibly rare fern that's been found in Killarney, Ireland, where it appears to be out of place. This neotropical fern, known as Stenogramitis myoceroides, has only ever been seen before in the Dominican Republic, Jamaica, and Cuba. That's more than 4,000 miles away from Ireland, raising the question of how it got here, how it's managed to remain undetected for all this time, and how it manages to survive the climate it's so unsuited for. It's unlikely that it was planted here deliberately because it was found in a location far from any roads or places of interest. That means it somehow naturally migrated across the Atlantic Ocean. Or that it's actually native to this area and it traveled in the other direction. The fern is growing in the Killarney National Park of County Kerry, one of the very few places in Europe you'll find any natural rainforest. The best explanation might be that the plant has clung on for thousands of years and grew during a time when the climate here was far warmer. How unnerved do you imagine you would be if you decided to renovate your home and discovered a collection of animal skulls underneath your staircase? Well, we know some people living in Wales and the UK who don't have to imagine that experience because they lived it. Bleddon and Carrie Jackson were carrying out modernization work on their 16th century home in November 2020 when they ripped out their old staircase and discovered a half-eaten rat, some old shoes, a few bottles filled with strange liquids, and horse skulls, along with jaw bones from other animals. It appears that the home they've lived in for years might once have been occupied by a witch. The staircase was built in front of a doorway that was sealed up during medieval times, so it's likely that the creepy artifacts haven't been seen since then. They have no idea where the objects might have come from. The farmhouse has been in the Jackson family for generations, so it might even be that the witch was one of Bleddon's distant relatives. The couple wasn't sure what to do with their surprise discovery, so they put it back and covered it all up again. You never know what you might find when you head out into the woods foraging for mushrooms. If you keep your wits about you and pay attention to your surroundings, you might discover almost anything. A 3,300-year-old sword from the Bronze Age, for example. This remarkable discovery was made by Roman Novak in the Czech Republic in November 2020 as he was out mushroom picking in the Jesenico forest, northern Moravia. Initially, all he saw was the metal tip poking out of the ground, but when it didn't move when he kicked it, he dug the object up and could hardly believe his own eyes when he saw what he was dealing with. He immediately contacted archaeologists, who came and fully excavated the site and also found a bronze axe to go with the sword. Based on the design of the weapon, which has an unusual octagonal hilt, it was thought to have been made in northern Germany. But further tests have revealed it's made from local materials. That's even stranger, because the forest was just as sparsely populated 3,300 years ago as it is today. Perhaps an ancient warrior lived out here in isolation, or perhaps someone just got lost in the woods. In 1928, a vessel known as the Manaslu sank in Georgian Bay, Griffith Island, Canada, and the wreck couldn't be found. It took until 2018 for the shipwreck to eventually be discovered, and when it happened, the discovery was made accidentally by scuba divers. Fortunately for shipwreck enthusiasts, the conditions at this level, 200 feet below the surface of the water, have preserved the Manaslu in an excellent state. Much of its cargo is still on board, including a rare 1927 Chevrolet Coupe that was brand new and had barely been driven at the time of the accident. Nobody knows for sure what caused the sinking, But the most popular theory is that the captain of the Manaslu had agreed to take on too many cattle, overloading his ship. There were over 100 on board, along with 21 passengers and the crew. It's thought that there might be as many as 7,000 shipwrecks in the Great Lakes, of which only 2,000 have been found so far. It's unlikely that the wreck will ever be raised because the stern is so deeply embedded in the bottom of the lake, but it's likely to become an attraction for divers in the area for years to come. If you moved into a new home and found a rusty metal box at the bottom of your garden, how long would you take to open it and find out what was inside? A few hours maybe? A day or two at the most? Matthew and Maria Kalana Emanuel of Staten Island, New York, USA, noticed such a box in their garden shortly after they moved in 2013, but didn't get around to opening it until May 2018. When they finally did, they discovered that it was full of gold, jewelry, and cash totaling more than $50,000. Along with all the valuable goods, there was an address scrawled on a piece of paper, and it was their neighbor's address. It turns out that their neighbors were robbed one day after Christmas in 2011, and the thieves were never caught. This rusty old box was their safe. The thieves must have panicked and thrown it over a fence or otherwise disposed of it shortly after the robbery. Included in the valuables were their neighbors' engagement rings, priceless objects they never thought they'd see again. Their stolen goods are now back in the hands of their rightful owners, and the neighbors are now good friends. It's taken years for experts to figure out what happened to the H.L. Hunley. But as of August 2017, we finally have an answer. The vessel was a kind of early submarine built by the Confederate side during the American Civil War. It became the first submarine in history to attack and destroy an enemy ship during battle when it sank the USS Housatonic on February 17, 1864. But it never made it back to base. And for more than 153 years, nobody knew why. Even its location was unknown until the wreck of the Hunley was found in 1995. It was only 1,000 feet away from the wreck of the Housatonic, so it's a little puzzling that nobody noticed it before then. The Hunley used torpedoes, but not the kind of torpedoes that we'd recognize today. These old-fashioned torpedoes had to be mounted on a spur and then physically rammed into their target. Studies carried out on the remains of the crew have revealed that when their torpedo exploded and destroyed the Housatonic, it sent a shockwave back through the Hunley with fatal consequences for everybody inside it. The submarine then sank because there was nobody alive to pilot it. What was the purpose of the strange metal monolith that turned up in the desert of Utah in the USA in November 2020? It made headlines all over the world. Was it a practical joke? Is it a leftover prop from the shooting of a movie or a work of art? Nobody knows for sure. And it's likely that we'll never know now because not long after the monolith was noticed and became famous, it disappeared. The shiny steel plank-shaped sculpture was first noticed by a helicopter crew passing over the area, but subsequent studies of Google Maps data have shown that it was standing in situ for about 3 years before it became famous. It looks a lot like the monoliths that were used in the filming of the classic science fiction movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. But that wasn't filmed here. It also looks a little like some of the sculptures created by minimalist artist John McCracken, but he passed away in 2011. If it's a practical joke, someone went to a lot of trouble to create it. The sculpture is 12 feet tall and buried deep in the red rocks that make up the desert floor. How did it get here? Where did it go? We'll probably never find out. We've been finding mummies in ancient Egypt for several hundred years, which means that some of the first ever to be discovered haven't been reassessed with the kind of technology we have at our disposal today. When we do go back and use that technology on older discoveries, we sometimes find amazing things. In November 2020, an American scientific journal reported that a synchrotron particle accelerator had been used to scan a 2,000-year-old mummy discovered during the 1700s, and it found a bizarre calcite artifact close to the site of the cadaver's abdominal incision. Although it isn't possible to conduct a close-up examination of the object, it's thought to be an amulet that was probably placed strategically to provide spiritual protection for the body during the embalming process. The scans appear to indicate that it's shaped like a scarab beetle, which is consistent with the style of many ancient Egyptian amulets. The most surprising finding, though, was that the mummy was that of a child no older than 5. That places it at odds with the portrait on the exterior, which clearly shows a much older woman. Perhaps this was the artist's interpretation of how she may have looked if she'd grown to adulthood. There are so many species of mammals and animals all over the world at the risk of extinction, so it's always a joy when a new, previously unknown species turns up. It's even better when 2 turn up at once, as was the case when scientists re-examined the DNA of cat-sized marsupials known as great gliders in the forests of Australia in the summer of 2020. The results indicated that rather than great gliders being one species, they're several. There's been a new focus on studying and cataloging Australia's forest-based wildlife after the bushfires that caused so much damage there in early 2020. Through understanding the animals better, experts hope to be able to make more detailed and realistic plans about the best way to go about conservation. As great gliders were already thought to be endangered, the revelation that there are more than one species of them means that the numbers of each species are even lower than we first thought. Studies have suggested that great gliders can survive in the wild for up to 15 years if they're given the opportunity to do so. So hopefully these cute, newly discovered creatures will be around for a few years to come yet. We can understand why a few animals living in the forests might have gone unnoticed until now. It's harder to understand how we could miss a whole organ inside the human body, given the fact that humans have been studying the inner workings of their own bodies for thousands of years. But apparently we have. In January 2017, a team from University Hospital Limerick in Ireland announced the discovery of a new organ within the digestive system known as the mesentery. It was initially overlooked as it was believed to be a part of the intestine, but the Irish team has proven beyond all doubt that it's a separate thing. They haven't quite worked out what it does yet, but perhaps that knowledge will come with time and further study. The team's research has since been peer-reviewed and published in The Lancet, which is a highly respected medical journal and is now listed in Gray's Anatomy. If anyone had paid more attention to Leonardo da Vinci, though, it wouldn't have taken this long to discover it. Amazingly, he described it in a study he carried out in 1508, but everybody ignored him. For those keeping count, the mesentery is the 79th known human organ. Who's to say there won't be an 80th? Our next discovery's going to be a little upsetting for any classic car enthusiasts. It's an old 1978 Chevrolet Corvette, and it's seen better days. The car attracted the attention of the internet when it was listed for sale in November 2020 because the sale listing included the phrase, "ran when parked." We're not disputing that the car was in a drivable condition when it was parked, but one look at it tells you that it's not in the same condition now. Perhaps that's not surprising. It's apparently been parked out in the open for more than 20 years. To compound the problem, the car's windows have been left partially open for all that time. That means the interior must be ruined and has probably become home to quite a few woodland critters. Nevertheless, someone is probably looking at these pictures and thinking that the vehicle would make a good restoration project, and they might not be wrong. If it were possible to get this old Chevy back into good-as-new condition, it'd be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Coins are among the most common types of antiques to be discovered anywhere in the world, and most coin discoveries aren't particularly interesting. This one, however, is. It's a collection of coins worth over $25,000. And until November 2020, it was hiding in the attic of James and Clarissa Mumford's house in Columbia, South Carolina, USA. The 19th century coins were apparently stashed away inside a drawer in the attic many years ago by the house's previous owner, and were then forgotten about when the owner moved out. That would have left James and Clarissa clear to cash in on them if they wanted to do so, but they're not that kind of people. The collection of 64 coins, which includes 46 rare gold $5 Liberty coins from 1849, is now back in the hands of the elderly couple who lived in the home before the Mumfords moved in. They confirmed that they'd forgotten all about them, but they were extremely grateful to have them back. Not everybody would be able to turn their backs on a potential $25,000 windfall, so this goes to show you that there are still some good people out there. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.